Thank you very much for coming along tonight. Denise has made enough food for an army, so the proceedings of the evening is I shall be introducing Zoe in a second. She's going to give a talk, and then there'll be some questions and answers, and then a chance, she'll have a seat, and you'll be able to have her dedicate or sign your book if you so wish. And there's, as I say, there's going to be plenty of food left over for snacks afterwards. Zoe popped into the shop and said to me, you know, I've written this book, and I get this all the time from people, and I thought, oh right, okay. But immediately I was just caught by she's such a bubbly, positive character. Any of you who know her, I think know exactly what I'm talking about.
Amazing. Give him that money after. It's on commission.
So yeah, I felt, you know, she just won me over straight away, and it's been an absolute pleasure to work with her. And the people who've come and booked, and I've got somebody, a doctor's dropped off a note for her, who's obviously worked with Zoe in the past, couldn't make it tonight, just spoke so highly of her. So, you know, you all know what you're about to hear. Those of you know. Those of you who don't, you're in for a wonderful sort of half an hour or so. So you haven't come to listen to me talk. So further ado, I introduce you to Zoe. Thank you.
Oh, what do you mean? Yeah.
Okay, it's a cracking start, Dave.
Great, good start. What did you have it on before? Is it on? Is yours on? Thank you.
I'm switched on. just to keep you on your guard. Okay. You switch that on. We got that okay? We're getting an echo on it, or is it alright? Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're there. Wow. You're not switch off.
I love you, Zoe. Well, just remember what you said.
Yeah, if you would. When I'm on Oprah, you will tell her about this. Okay. Right, we'll do without the mic. Well, first of all, thanks for coming, as to say, because although I expected, you know, one or two friends to turn up, and perhaps one or two old patients, as it were, just to make sure that I'm not sort of dishing the dirt on them. But it's really nice to see some faces I don't recognise as well, so thank you, first of all. Now, they say about best laid plans and everything, and if I told you that this afternoon I thought, well, I better start preparing a few words for tonight, you know, because I can't go in, you know, just ad-libbing. I'll set something up, you know, that sounds presentable. And like most people, if we're really honest, we worry about things that perhaps don't matter too much. So I said to my other half, there'll be people there tonight that, you know, won't know me, so I better try and look half decent. Better put a suit on or something. So, like most people, we've got no room in the house, so the loft is the place where all our things that we use once in a blue moon is. You know, there's all sorts up there, like there is in everybody's loft, but my suits are up there on one of those shop racks, you know, with the bags on them and everything. Very organised. It's organised until you decide you'll go up the loft ladders while you're having a telephone conversation with the phone in one hand and making your way up the loft ladder with the other hand. And that's what my other half did.
You sure you want a glass of wine, Zoe?
No, it wasn't. I must admit, I've thought about it since then. And like all these things, I'm writing the speech thinking, now, what am I going to say? You know, that I didn't say last time. That sounds quite interesting. And the next thing is I hear, help! I'm hurt, I've fallen down the loft ladders. And at the bottom of the loft ladders was my partner with probably about a 5-inch gash on the back of the head, blood everywhere, all over my carpet. I mean, that's pretty, you know, if you're going to bleed, you'll bleed on the carpet, what can you say, you know. And that was the end of, you know, the speech, so sorry about that. So after I'd said, I'm just going to call 999, then I'm going to ring Denise and tell her we might be a little bit late for tonight's appointment. But that's life, isn't it? And what this book is about is a slice of real life, because we live in a world where we wished it was always, you know, hearts and flowers and everything was happily ever after, and it ain't. You know, we take the rough with the smooth in life, and we're here for the whole kaleidoscope of emotions. So we're in it for the long term while we're here, so as much as joy and happiness are the things that we like to court, unfortunately some of the shitty emotions along the way, like loss and bereavement and depression and anxiety, and anybody drinking the wine at the back, just keep drinking because it gets worse. But no, you know, the whole range of emotions are what we're exposed to. And as a nurse, certainly, and I know there's quite a few nurses here, they're the ones that are clinking the glasses. Yeah. But as nurses, we're exposed to those emotions on a daily basis, and we are privileged, and we consider ourselves privileged. We're going through a bit of bad press at the moment as a group of people, as is the NHS. I was talking to somebody the other day who is a professor, and he's very interested in all this mind-body stuff, and I said to him, if the NHS was a person at the moment, what do you think that person would look like? Would it look healthy and vibrant, and would it be going, hooray, and I can't wait to get up in the morning? Or if it was a person, might it at the moment be slightly different in its message? And he agreed with me that at the moment we have an NHS, unfortunately, that's on its knees. And if we were talking about the NHS in relation to a person, I think we'd see somebody that was stooped, looked like they've got the cares, the worries of the world, you know, in the furrows on the brow, be quite despondent, sad, because unfortunately at the moment we are in times generally of hardship, and, you know, unfortunately the NHS is a big part of that. So for those of us that go to work in the NHS, we're doing our best, believe it or not, and we go into a career to look after people because we care. It might sound an old cliche, you know, when people say, well, why did you go into nursing? Well, I went into it because I wanted to care for people. But the top and bottom of it is, for most of us, that's how it starts off, and that's what we want to do. And unfortunately, the pressure at the moment on staff in the NHS, and when I talk about nurses, I mean it generically really, I mean carers, I mean doctors, I mean, you know, I'm talking about everybody that's involved in first line care. But at the moment, it's a pretty tough place to work in. And one of the reasons for the book was that I felt I wanted to, one, communicate to people what good we do, what values we take from our patients, and how special that relationship is to us. You know, it matters. It really does matter. There's people in the room, without me pointing them out, who know what it's like to be involved with people at times of life that are the most stressful. And I'm really pleased that those people are here to listen to this, because when we go out and we do our job, we care passionately. And you know as well as I do that the press we've been getting recently is not good. The report that was produced at the end of 2013, just somebody remind me what the name of it was. the what's it report?
Francis.
Francis, thank you very much. The Francis report, that basically says, unfortunately, about the discrepancy that there is in care and how really patients have suffered. And it would be wrong to pretend that they haven't. Patients are suffering. They're not suffering on the whole because nurses don't care. They're suffering because the amount of personnel there to do the caring, and I think most of us know this when we go and visit people in hospital, we can see it. People are run off their feet. It's not that they don't care, but they are absolutely snowed under with the amount of responsibility. And we're seeing an increasing picture of staff on long-term sick leave in the NHS because they're exhausted. We've got people coming to work on a daily basis who are burnt out beyond burnout, believe you and me. I mean, I've been there, I've worn the t-shirt 3 times actually, but I also know other people who are going to work on a daily basis who are exhausted. And I can see my nurse colleagues nodding. Yes, that's right, it's true. But the good news is that what we do well, we do very well. And the book is about us sharing the things that we learn from our patients, because my patients have been my greatest teachers. The life lessons that I've learnt from patients, I wouldn't know where to start and finish really, but if I just said to you for a start some of the characters in the book, and the characters are real in the book, their names have been changed if they've expressed a wish or their family have, and some of them have said, no, I want my name in, or I want my deceased person's name in. And I've respected that in both cases, but those patients are real, and they represent a slice of real life, because there's people in there that you will instantly warm to, and you will think, oh, what a lovely person this person is, how courageous they are in the face of adversity, and as the saying goes, shit happens, and it does. And these people in the book are represent what courage and what depth of emotion that we dig into at the times we need it most, and what courageous people we are. It also talks about trust, it talks about hope, it talks about love. And I don't mean fluffy love as in romantic love perhaps. I'm talking about love that means that when someone is dying or close to death, that we communicate the love we feel for one another by the things that we do and the gestures that we show each other. One of the main driving forces behind the book is about love. It's about the fact that in the afterword and the forward in the book, which I draw your attention to, because those are the parts in the book for me which are really important, and they encourage us to consider self-love. Because I'm not a new agey person, and I'm not particularly religious, but what I will say is that I've learnt, and that I've seen other people have to learn the hard way, is the importance of self-love. Because self-love is the thing that if we get right, we care enough about ourselves to actually say no sometimes. Because a word that's very out of press and people don't like to use is selfish. The connotations of being selfish, when you say the word as we use it, are about self-centeredness, selfish. Actually, that word has got misused, because what it actually means is to consider yourself first. Because what I've learnt, and if you're going to have 3 doses of, I don't know, nervous breakdown, burnout, whatever you want to call it, then it's to be hoped you learn something at the end of it happening 3 times that render you inactive for months at a time. And what I've learnt is that if you don't look after yourself first, how can you look after the people in your care? And although we're talking about self-love, and it sounds a bit new agey, it isn't. It just means self-care. Because my experience is we all have great intentions to look after ourselves, and we all say, oh, I'm going to go to Pilates and I'm going to eat all the right foods and I'm going to get I'm going to do these meditations.
He's on the way home.
And we're going to, I'm going to do this meditation stuff, and I've got a book on stress, and it starts off like that with great intentions, but we fall by the wayside, a lot of us. I can only speak from a nursing perspective, but I see it in people who are complementary therapists. I've seen it in teachers. I've seen it in lots of other areas. And mainly it's because we just don't put self-care on the agenda. We look after everybody else first, kids, parents, parents-in-law, neighbours, but we don't really nurture ourselves first. We see it, and I think a lot of it's down to our culture. We see it as being self-indulgent. And I would encourage people, when they read the book, each character will give you a different emotion to take a look at. Like I've said, there's hope, there's trust, there's courage. Some of the chapters are really funny. This isn't to depress people. Some of the chapters are really funny, but some of them are there to make us think. There are characters in the book, one particular one, I'm going to have to remember what I've called him actually before I reveal somebody's identity who's no longer with us, but I'll have to remind myself. It's the infected finger. Okay, so chapter 12. Now, this person was one of the most unpalatable people you could wish to meet. Not only did he smell awful, not only did he have the foulest language and the dirtiest, smelliest house I think I've ever been in. In fact, you wiped your feet on the way out and not on the way in. There was cat excrement everywhere, and I mean everywhere. There was nowhere where it wasn't. And this particular character, you will immediately feel yourself thinking, oof, and you'll want to almost be repulsed because it's a natural feeling. But I would ask yourself why it is that we feel like that about certain people, and how we read another one and we immediately find them very endearing. And one of the reasons, I think, is because what we don't know is we don't know that person's history.
What happened in the past to make him like that?
Yeah, exactly. There is a lot of evidence to suggest that, and this is modern evidence, and it also has an old saying, the Jesuit saying, give me the child until he is 7 and I will show you the man. So that's like hundreds of years old. But now we're looking at it again, because what we're saying now is modern research is suggesting that up until the age of 6, literally, is unconscious behaviour. So whatever we tell a child in those first 6 years, it believes. So if we tell it, that it's a pain in the neck and that it's naughty and that you're always causing trouble, it will believe it. So what we have to get right is we have to get these messages right early in life, because for that guy, we don't know what his first 6 years were about. It could have been hellish. And if we're led to believe that 95% of the way we behave through the remainder of our life is based on that first 6 years. So everything in that beyond that, we have to unpick. So if you've been told horrendous things up to that age, then 95% of it is your blueprint as an adult. So that's why we have therapists, because we're unpicking all the mess that was said in those very formative years. If we get those messages right in those first 6 years, then there's hope for everybody, isn't there? Not to be sort of an evangelist, how do you say it? Evangelist, thank you, yeah. Thank you. It seems a long time since the ambulance turned up on the doorstep and my partner was going down the stairs with an oxygen mask on, so you'll have to excuse me for it not being particularly...
Is she all right?
She's, believe it or not,
How is she though?
they said to me in A&E, why didn't you say it was Zoe? And she said, well, I didn't like to. And they went, oh God, and they went, whose book signing are you going to? And I went, mine. And they went, what? And it was the A&E staff, and they went, well, tell you what, we'll babysit her while you go and do your talk. And I thought to myself, you couldn't make this up, could you really? So I said, have she got some money? Have you got some change? Get yourself a drink later on. I thought, this is true. We'll feed her and we'll glue her back together, because this gash is, honestly, it's huge and it's quite wide. And
Are you going to get her later?
I was at the back of her head going, oh, it's nothing. But I want to just read you something that I put at the forward of the book that just, actually it's in the introduction. This is a poem that was written, and I want you to think about this with what I've just told you, that 95% in that first 6 years, so remember the foul old man. Just remember this poem. It's by Dorothy Law Nolte, and it's called Children Learn What They Live. If children live with criticism, they learn to condemn. If children live with hostility, they learn to fight. If children live with ridicule, they learn to be shy. If children live with shame, they learn to feel guilty. If children live with encouragement, they learn confidence. If children live with tolerance, they learn to be patient. If children live with praise, they learn to appreciate. If children live with acceptance, they learn to love. If children live with approval, they learn to like themselves. If children live with honesty, they learn truthfulness. If children live with security, they learn to have faith in themselves and others. If children live with friendliness, they learn the world is a nice place in which to live. So what I try and do is, when I encounter a patient that perhaps just tries my patience a little bit, I try and remember that, because it's so easy to judge, and we do it all the time. I do it all the time, and we all do it. I'm afraid it's part of being a human being, and we have preconceived ideas about things. We all have our own map of reality. So my map of reality will be different to this lady's and this gentleman's and so on, because we were brought up differently. Some of us are females, some of us are males. We're different ages. We have different cultural values, different beliefs, different religions. So there's so much shaped us all before we even, have a chance to sort of mix with other people. So what we have to remember is those things and that past experience that we talk about in that first 6 years is largely going to be who we see in front of us. So I would just say to you that when, in any walk of life, you come across people who, push your buttons a bit, just try and remember that little bit that, makes us just stop. There's a lady that I've become quite friendly with who's paid the ultimate price, or her husband's paid the ultimate price, as his death was a result of NHS negligence. Now, this lady is a wonderful person. She goes round and she gives talks. She's not bitter and twisted about nurses, and yet it's nurses' negligence that actually cost her husband's life at 42. Now then, we're all shocked and we're all outraged at that. Now then, what I'd say to you is, those nurses cared. They didn't not care, they cared. What the problem was, which the bigger problem always is that we're working with scarce resources. We've got people who are on their knees. And when we're on our knees, it brings out our worst behaviours. So we have a lack of concentration. We're not motivated the same. We're short, we're snappy. You only have to think how you are with your nearest and dearest. Who gets it first? They get it first, don't they? On the whole, when we're feeling stress. So you've got a stressed nurse or a stressed doctor or a stressed carer. And it's the bigger picture we have to look at, because none of us want to end up feeling short-tempered and feeling like, or knowing that we're missing things. But we do. And this particular chap, his name was Paul, and he went into hospital. And the reason he went into hospital was he'd overindulged in the fruit at the fruit farm where he'd been picking strawberries with his 2 kids and his wife. And because instead of them going in the basket, he was having one too many, he got diarrhoea. Sorry, there's a gnat there, or a mosquito. It's heading your way, madam. It's the simple. And he got diarrhoea. Simple as that, got diarrhoea. But he got gripes and pains, and he didn't think for a minute. And he was a diabetic, so he didn't tell his wife he'd been eating all the fruit. So the next few hours, he said, wow, this raging stomachache, and he got this profuse diarrhoea. Went to the GP out of hours. They said, oh, look, we've done your bloods, we're going to have to bring you in. Any reason this could have happened? And he was going, well, I did have a few strawberries this afternoon, but no, you might have an infection. And they didn't take any chances because this guy was a diabetic. So they took him in. And unfortunately, when this lady tells this story, it's so profound, and she gives this story to she tells this story to student nurses, so that hopefully, right from the beginning, we look at the basic things instead of the things that we think are so important. And the basic things, the basic nursing care which we were all taught, are the things like, is this person comfortable? Can they get to the toilet? And have they had a drink or something to eat? The problem was, nobody asked that man in 8 days if he'd had a drink. Now, the book is called Who Cares? And it's written by his wife, Amanda Steen. And she goes round and she very positively talks about nursing, because she and her husband are very, well, before Paul died, were very pro-nursing. But basically, that man wasn't offered a drink in 8 days. And when they traced it all back, he went into renal failure, and his wife kept going to the desk and saying, my husband's confused, is his sugars all right? Because he's diabetic. Yeah, his sugars are fine. He's very confused. He's saying things that, and she said, I don't know whether he's actually had a wee. Oh, yes, he's had a wee. We've seen him back into the bathroom. Yeah, he's definitely had a wee. And he kept saying to his wife, I've not weed, today. And then the next day, I've not weed. And she said, you have, love. You have, because she trusted us. And when you go to the desk and you speak to the senior nurse, and the senior nurse says, oh, yes, he has weed. And she kept looking at his fluid balance chart, which is, for those people who don't know that is supposedly what you've drunk goes on the chart, and what's come out the other end goes on the chart. And there was nothing on this chart, so she got no way of, knowing whether or not it was kosher or not. So she kept saying, he's not himself. He really isn't very well. No, he's fine. And he started itching. Now, for those people who are nursing and medical, they will know that that's a sign of your kidneys packing up. And nobody picked it up again. So this guy, by now, is itching. He's been in about 3 or 4 days. He's still confused. Everybody's saying, now the diarrhoea's stopped, he'll be going home. And they went to discharge him. And he started, he was just so confused, his wife couldn't get hardly anything logical out of him. He, by this time, was saying all the time, I'm itching, I'm itching. Nobody picked up on any of this. And eventually, this lady said, I want him to have his bloods checked before he leaves the hospital. No, there's no need. No, his bloods are fine. And eventually he had his bloods checked, and all of a sudden, what? Action stations. This man is in renal failure, and unfortunately it was irreparable damage, and over a period of the next 18 months, he sunk further and further down. And that was just out of the fact that that man didn't get a drink. So I think what we've got to do is, one of the things about the book as well is to try and remedy some of this and get back to real values. The patients in this book are the sort of patients only a village really throws up to us. Real characters. And the only reason we get to know real characters is when we invest time with people, and when we spend a bit of time getting to know them as people. And we get to know their personal histories and such. I know it's harder in a hospital, I'm not saying it's easy, but we have to start correcting some of these basic discrepancies in nursing care, because I know that the nurses in this room really do care, as I care, and I think the majority of nurses really do go into it and stay in it because they care. But as we start to become burnt out ourselves, we are unable to then, we're not looking after ourselves, so we can't look after our patients. So although it sounds very sobering and very depressing, I don't mean it to, but what I want people to realise is there's a much bigger picture to this issue of immediately jumping on the bandwagon and saying these nurses didn't care, at the North Staffs. There's a much bigger picture. If we are so under-resourced, I can honestly say to you that I've worked closely with a team of nurses in the last 12 months, and I've seen every member of that team go off sick. That's a community nursing team. I've seen them all go off sick. And if I'm really honest, brutally honest, I would say that 80 to 90% is because they're burnt out, because they're working when they shouldn't be at work. And I can see the nurses nodding because it's true. Not to frighten everybody that, you know, when you come into hospital or you need a discharge
You're
nurse.
not convincing student nurses about his and third year.
Yeah. But it is sobering. But the book, when I decided to write a book, people kept saying to me, you know, you're a storyteller by nature, write about your patients. And I thought, well, I should really write one of these self-help books for my own, for nurses. And I thought, I can't do that. There's stacks and stacks of them now. The biggest growing area in the bookstores, I think Steve and Denise will sort of back me up on this, is self-help. Because people are desperate as to how to get themselves better. So they look at what the latest celebrities said about, you know, how they did it. Because it's an area, this self-neglect that's generally happening. It's not just in health, it's everywhere. So there's this huge section now in bookstores. And when I first burnt out, which was 10 years ago, it was like this. It was about 8 books. So it shows you in the last 10 years, despite all modern technology and everything, how much we're putting on ourselves more than we were. We're looking for answers as to this self-neglect, this self-debt. And the nurses amongst us, I would really encourage, and this doesn't go down well with NHS managers when they hear me say this, is to sometimes say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Because we unfortunately, as we become vulnerable and our mood becomes low, we're not very good then at being even in a strong position to say, no, I can't do it. So we say yes when we mean no. It's called the oh shit syndrome, because you go,
Yeah, you do.
yes.
Oh, yeah, I'll do.
And in the bubble that's going up here, it's, oh shit, why have I said that? Because we're saying yes when we mean no, and we get home and we then kick the cat and say, I said I'll do an extra shift next week, or one tomorrow, or I'll work 12 hours instead of 8 hours. I don't want to. But we do it actually because we know at the moment there's nobody else to do it. And then we've got this chronic deficit that unfortunately, you know, we don't want to continue because we want to continue to give good